Today we're talking about this one. This is VISSER. Front, back, quite a lot of glare on this one. It's quite difficult to see. This is a Chronicles book. It's not technically called the VISSER Chronicles, but people will refer to it as the VISSER Chronicles. So of course Catherine is back to write this one as opposed to a ghostwriter. Now the funniest thing I find about this, before we actually go into the plot, is look at the cover. You'd think this book was mainly about VISSER 3 because he's on the front cover, but actually this book is wholly narrated and pretty much wholly about VISSER 1, Eva, Edris, that character. So it is a bit strange. Someone pointed out a while ago, I think on the Discord, and apologies if I forget who it was, but why is VISSER 3 on the front? It's like, okay, Harry Potter, and the first book comes out, Philosopher's Stone, and there's a big picture of Ron Weasley on the front. You'd read the book and think, no, surely Harry should have been on the front of that one, really. That's the case of this one. Not that I dislike the cover, I think it's a great cover. And funnily enough, Romas Koukalis, the person who drew these covers, has just released art prints. I released a video about that recently. Go get that if you really like this cover. It's on a slightly different background, it's pretty cool. So go see that. Right, plot. We start with a prologue of Edris, who is VISSER 1, VISSER 1's Yeerk name, inside Eva, Marco's mother, leaving Marco's dad and Marco behind and going on a sailing adventure to be picked up and taken away to the mothership, you'd imagine. Not really relevant to anything, but it's nice to have that little scene just thrown in there. But then we move on to the main plot. Now the whole plot is based around a trial in front of the Council of 13, which is comprised of apparently 9 Hawk-Bajir, 2 Taxons, and 2 aliens who are apparently in shadow and couldn't be seen. You'd think that the VISSERs would know who's on the big Council of 13, you know. It's like a commander in the Navy not knowing who the Admiral of the fleet is. But hey, we're not Yeerks, so I don't know how this stuff works, but hey, that rhymes. But yeah, the Council of 13 are there, and VISSER 1 is on trial. And VISSER 3 is there to provide evidence. Because they don't have lawyers in the Yeerk Empire, apparently. Probably one of the only benefits for the Yeerk Empire, let's be honest. But yeah, for whatever reason, they decide that VISSER 3 has to be there throwing in his usual nonsense. And he does speak a lot of bollocks in this. He really does. And he probably does... It's probably his fault that things didn't go quite according to plan. But one thing I have to point out is that you remember book 30, which was the reunion, when we talked to VISSER 1 while she's in her hotel room, and she says to the Animorphs, I believe it was Marco and Tobias Nax, that there is a warrant, that she's got a death warrant, that she is to be, that basically there's a warrant for her execution. Now, again, I am not a Yeerk. Obviously, fictional race. I don't know quite how the politics works, but if it's anything like the human race and the human trials, because this is basically a judicial system for the Yeerks, then usually you don't have an order for execution before you've had the trial to establish guilt. Call me crazy. So, I don't know whether this book's got it wrong or book 30 got it wrong, but something is wrong there. But, you know, pithy little detail. Let's just move on. VISSER 1 has been accused of multiple crimes. And the Council of 13 actually go through the list of the types of treason that Edris has been accused of and their punishments. Most of them involve execution by Dracon Beam. There's also one execution by starvation. And there's also one execution by torture, which I thought was a bit extreme. Why? Yeerks! I'm going to say this so often in this book. I do not know how the Yeerks operate, so la-di-da, it's fiction. She's essentially accused of treason because VISSER 3 says that she's allying with the Andalites. The evidence for this is incidental, really. Accused of delaying the invasion of Earth, somehow, even though VISSER 3 is in charge of it. But I think the major thrust of VISSER 3's argument is that she's allying with the Andalites and she's messing around with them. It turns out there's probably a reason the Council of 13 have brought VISSER 3 in, because he is partly on trial as well. They don't say why, he hasn't got any charges against him, but the mere fact that he's there spouting off his usual bollocks is reason enough for the Council of 13 to turn around and say, actually, this guy's a bit of a shit as well. might as well execute him too. So as the book progresses, he's also put on the spot, and at times it looks like he's more on trial than Edris is. Right, so Garoth is, I must mention Garoth, he's the only Council of 13 member who is named, and he's the one who talks most often. Now, Edris, portmanteau of Eva and Edris there. Apparently they've had communication before, and he is a little more sympathetic to her than you'd expect. But he's the one that talks the most, the rest are just sort of there. And he demands that Edris go through the story of how this all began. And that's essentially this book. We're going from Edris' starting point as a sub-VISSER 409, to the point where she is in Eva, Marco's mother, having established the sharing and having been promoted to VISSER 1. One more thing I'll point out before I go into that part of the plot. One of the acts of treason that the Council of 13 lists is murder of subordinates. Now, I read this and I actually wrote it down on my notes, but it was addressed later in the book, so I took it off my notes because the book satisfied me in that regard. But VISSER 3 has murdered countless subordinates. He murders subordinates right here in this book, right in front of the Council of 13. And yeah, why is he not on trial for that? Why is he the one accusing? Or is it the Council of 13 know that this is going on, and he's there because they want to, sort of like that episode of Game of Thrones that everyone hated where Littlefinger was killed. He was accusing people, and then suddenly Sansa's like, step forward, Littlefinger. Shock horror, shitty script. It's that sort of thing. Let's be fair, The Illusion is better than the whole of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. I know that happened in Season 7, but you get my drift. We start to learn about Edris and how she started off as this sub-VISSER, and she was on a little planet system somewhere between the Hork-Bajir and Taxon homeworlds, where there was easy travel. And she's tasked with locating a Class 5 race. Now, it's class system for the Yeerks, so Class 1 is something that basically they don't want to invest because they can't, essentially. So races that can't be infested for whatever reason. Class 2, details somewhere here, there. Class 3 is something like Hork-Bajir, who are really good, really useful, but they're not entirely dexterous in the ways that they need, and also they're short on numbers, because as Ed just points out, the Andalites killed them all. Bastards. Class 4, Andalites, because they're great, they're lovely, but they're too formidable to really challenge. And then there's Class 5, perfect host specimen. And so Edris is tasked to find one of them. And a report comes through. This is a strange part of the book for me. A report comes through from VISSER 3, or his rank at the time. So Esplin, that's his name, isn't it? Esplin has spouted out this report that he's found these things called humans, and he thinks they're a Class 5 race. Now, you'd think at that point that Edris's job is done for her. Oh look, there's a record now of a Class 5 race, and we've learnt that there are billions of them, and we've seen them, a sub-VISSER somewhere has seen them. But no, apparently nobody cares, apart from Edris. And I thought, what? So this report's gone out, Class 5 race, yay, hallelujah. What are we talking about again? And Edris is just there. Class 5. I remember them saying that. I'm the only one. And then she rushes off to find them. Seriously? Not any other Yeerk thought, right, so we've discovered a Class 5 species. Let's act upon this. No, it was only Edris. Okay. You've started on a shaky footing, book. Sub-VISSER 409, Edris, is going to be shifted off to become a taxon host somewhere to do a different role. But she doesn't want to do that, so she takes Essam, who is one of her subordinates who used to be a sub-VISSER but was demoted. Takes Essam because she thinks that he will just do the job as he's told, and he's easily manipulated. And they go off in a stolen ship to find this Class 5 race that no other Yeerk can be bothered to go and find. There are bits in between, like here, there's a pause where VISSER 3 jumps in to cut off the memory and is saying things like, oh, she's just admitted guilt, stealing ships and what have you. And every time that happens, the council just says, oh, just crack on with your story. Take a note, just crack on. It happens several times through, so I won't go too much into those details from this point on. But Edris and Essam get to the vicinity of Earth, and they're picking up radio signals and all that sort of stuff, and they start narrowing things down. They go to the Middle East, where it's relatively deserted, because it's a desert, and they land in the middle of what we can assume is the Gulf War. Okay? So they go there, and they step out. They're both in Hork-Bajir hosts, by the way, at this point. And they were starving, they were close to starvation. Not that that really plays into anything, but they go across and they just about avoid getting blown up as the Americans bomb a bunch of insurgents. And it's quite gruesome, actually, because just a human torso just lands beside Edris. And Essam points it out, these humans fight amongst each other as if, this is strictly a human thing, which is hard to believe, but for the purposes of this particular fiction, yeah, fine. So they find out that the humans war with each other, and they have a variety of weapons such as bows, all the way up to nuclear atomic bombs. So they're learning all about this stuff, but not before they take the first human host, who was a soldier on the Iraqi side. They run up as Hork-Bajir, grab him, and Edris head to the human. Infest goes in, whoa, this is a human. And she goes into how there's two sides to the brain, and there's all this intelligence going on, all this self-doubt thing, like the two sides of the brain are fighting each other. Very interesting little segment. And then they reboard the ship. They find Edris's old host, who is running away, but obviously not quick enough and not smart enough to find a place to hide. And they do a bit more finding out about how the human brain works, and they gather information from this guy before eliminating him. Now, this happens a lot, so every time Edris infests a human, that human ends up dead in some way, form or another. But they've now got the information. They narrow down that they want to go to America, and they go to Hollywood. That's right, Hollywood, because they established that Hollywood is the most important place on Earth. What a load of shit. But for the purposes of this, So, they go down to Hollywood, and they stumble upon one of these Hollywood Hills, or Beverly Hills bloody mansion things. And they come across a guy called Lowenstein, who is this rich guy, sort of frumpy looking guy. And there's must be like one of those women, prostitutes or something like that. And she's there. She's called Jenny Lines. It's not her official name, but that's how she's referred to more often than not. And she's referred to specifically in the book as a bimbo. I forget who by. I think it was Alison Kim, who we'll meet later. But this bimbo prostitute, Jenny Lines, is Edris's next host. And it's quite funny because she's one of these just wacky, not quite there people. And Edris is in this girl's head, and the first thought on her mind is, you can't do this to me. And it's a bit funny, but she's a habitual drug user, It's probably why she's called Jenny Lines. All that sort of jazz. But she's a complete empty-headed bimbo, as the book rightly points out. They take advantage of these two humans, dispose of the old Hork-Bajir hosts, and they just go about their life for a little while as Jenny Lines and Lowenstein. There's a bit around this part of the book where we come back out of the memory and back into the Council of 13 chamber, which it turns out is a part of the Yeerk pool, the major Yeerk pool we know about. And there's a part on page 59. It's VISSER 3 speaking to VISSER 1. You may be right, VISSER 1. I lack your knowledge of humans. I have never been in a human host, though I have, of course, acquired a human morph. And I've thought about this bit. Now, forgive me if I am wrong, if my memory's a bit too clouded. But didn't VISSER 3, or whatever he was at the time, didn't he infest Chapman at one point in the Andalite Chronicles? He put some other Yeerk in his old host body and briefly went into Chapman so that he could stay doing things. That's the implication that I got from the Andalite Chronicles, which would imply that VISSER 3 had previously had a human controller, even if just for a brief moment. It was that part just before he started shooting at Elfangor, before he went and found the Yellow Mustang, and I cried because that book was so awful. But yeah, VISSER 3 has had a, as far as I remember, if I am wrong, please do tell me, but I think this is wrong. I've never had a human host, whatever. I thought that was wrong. And then it's on page 60, the very next page, where something rather unusual happened. Because a few pages ago, basically 2 pages ago, the Council of 13 said, at the top of page 58, we will adjourn for 1 standard hour. Now, we don't know what a standard hour is here. It's obviously heavily implied that it's distinct from an Earth hour, hence why Axe is always saying your Earth hours sort of thing. So we don't know how long a standard hour lasts. But we have a conversation as soon as Garroth says that and the hologram disappears between the 2 VISSERs. And as soon as that conversation ends, Garroth is back and the rest of the Council of 13, and there doesn't seem to be any breaks in this. So it probably adds up to 3 minutes, or 3 Earth minutes, standard hour. Now, plausible, very plausible, until later on in this book. So just keep that in mind. And again, just a couple more things. I haven't got many notes on this book, so I've got 2 here that I'll cover now before I forget. Soon after Edris has taken Jenny Lines, there's a rather humorous little comment thrown in here. And is it a dig? I don't know. Page 73. Jenny Lines is talking to Edris in her head. I'm hotter than half these so-called actresses. I mean, have you ever really looked at Sarah Jessica Parker? I thought, ooh, why are we having digs at Sarah Jessica Parker here? Seriously? It's a bit harsh, Catherine. Okay, fair. And then on page 75, Essam shook his large head of his host body, that being Lowenstein. Essam shook the head of his large head of his host body, already beginning to adopt human characteristics as a good Yeerk should do when in a host. Now this would be fair, saying, oh, he's shaking his head because that's what humans do and he's getting used to the human body. But if we zoom back to page 66, when he is still in his Hawkbajir body, the page starts, he shook his head. Just a bit of inconsistency, book. Just saying. But thankfully, that's near enough all the inconsistencies out the way in terms of notes. So, well done, book. Just don't do it again. Okay? Edris wants a better host body than Jenny Lines. So she goes to a house party with somebody, a Korean lady called Alison Kim. And whilst she's in the pool, she goes in as Jenny Lines, pretends to play a game, drags her under the water, and does the whole head-to-head thing and crawls into Alison Kim. Of course then, just before he exits Jenny Lines' brain, orders her to take a gulp of water, essentially drowning her, and Jenny Lines dies. So that's how many people has she murdered now? So we count the 2 Hawkbajir hosts, so that's 2. Jenny Lines is now dead, as well as the Iraqi soldier. So 4 murders so far. Great. Essam decides to take a new host as well, and they dispose of Lowenstein, so taking up to 5 murders now. Dispose of him, and takes a host called Hildy Gervais, that's it. I've just looked it up on Seropedia because my memory is bad. So Hildy Gervais and Alison Kim are the two longest standing host bodies that they take. And Edris is surprised by how intelligent her new host is, Alison Kim. We get to a part in the book which is very interesting to me. Throughout this book, we get a painted picture of how the Yeerks see the host. And I think it's a valuable painting to paint when it comes to the Animorphs series as a large universe sort of thing. For massive parts of this book, the hosts are seen as objects. They're completely objectified throughout this. Case in point, when Edris referred to her old Hork-Bajir host, she wouldn't refer to the Hork-Bajir as he or she, which Hork-Bajir are male and female, so you'd think so, especially since that was her host body. She knows all this stuff and probably interacts with the Hork-Bajir sometimes in her head. Refers to this Hork-Bajir as it. Now, I asked people in the Discord what goes on here. Is this a training thing that the Yeerks do, where they want to demoralise the host by not referring to them individually? And as I continued to read through the book after asking the Discord, I started to get a better picture as I went through. And Edris explains it herself. She goes through the list saying, she explains it to Garoth, I believe, later on in the book. She said, the Geds are barely sentient, the Taxons are mad beasts, the Hork-Bajir, and she sort of hesitates, says, you can pretend that you can tell yourself that you're more intelligent than them and just use that as a shield to protect yourself from the emotions. But when it comes to humans, humans are equally intelligent to Yeerks, at least abstractly. And so it's much more difficult for them to shield the human psyche from them. And so Edris starts to refer to her human host by their genders, so he, she, etc. So that was very interesting. It's great to see how the Yeerks see the humans differently from the other hosts. They're very similar to the Hork-Bajir host, but the Hork-Bajir aren't very intelligent. So the Yeerks say to themselves, and it's pretty heavily implied, that they think of Hork-Bajir as just inferior because they're less intelligent than us. So obviously the Yeerks have this superiority complex when it comes to their intelligence, and they just use that to shield themselves against the Hork-Bajir emotions. But with humans, it's a bit different. And all this culminates in love. Love, love, love. Everyone loves a bit of love. It's great. Alison Kim falls in love with Hildy Gervais. And our two Yeerk friends, SM and Edris, fall for it as well. And they end up having kids. Now, this is a major plot point when it comes to the Council of 13 scenes, because VISSER's saying, look, that she's got sympathy for the enemy and the hosts, and that's a count of treason against thine. Against thine. What the fuck am I doing? But yeah, that's a big weapon of his. Now, Hildy Gervais. Hildy Gervais. Where did we first see him in this book, actually? Well, what happens is, VISSER 3 wheels in this hobo, this homeless guy, fucking piss-stained shoes and all that. And says, do you recognise this human? And it turns out it is Hildy Gervais. He's still alive, but he's gone mad. And he's seen as mad, and he's homeless and, you know, raving lunatic, one would say. It turns out that is Hildy Gervais, and that brings about a lot of these memories. VISSER 3, at some point roughly in the middle of the book, demands that there's a live memory transfer protocol put into place, and that is where Garoth, it turns out to be Garoth, actually goes in to Edris's memories. This is all getting very confusing at this point. Now, I will just take this pause to say, I'm not sure I can cover this book really properly, fully in this episode. It's one of those, and probably the first time in this series, where I think to myself, if I want to do a proper, thorough analysis of this, I'd have to read it twice, because there's a lot of stuff in here, really packed in. So just take that into account. Let's get back to it. Garoth does a live memory transfer protocol and goes into Edris's memories at about this point where she is falling in love with human life, as it were, and all this is going on, and starts prodding around and seeing what's going on, seeing them fall in love, essentially. Seeing them fall in love. And he seems to get a bit of sympathy from it. He's got a, you know, he holds back too much from judgment, but he obviously takes note of it. Gareth plays everything very, very steadily. He sees everything, has a few little quips here and there, and then just backs off and never really expresses which way he's going. There are a few clues here or there, but they're spread quite thin. It's very interesting. I like Gareth. I think he's a good character. I'm actually tempted to write a Council of 13 Chronicles. I've already got some ideas springing around in my little nugget of a brain. But he sees all this falling in love, and he finds out about the two kids. So the two kids are called Darwin and Madra, boy and girl. That Alison Kim / Edris and Hildy Gervais / Essam have together. Two kids. Very interesting. Now, this is the one time we really see that Edris shows any form of empathy. Because I know a bit too much glare coming off that book, isn't there? I know we're supposed to connect in a way to Edris in this book, but she really is a psychopath. She really is a psychopath. And this is the one time where she shows any real empathy, really, to these two kids. And it's the only thing that's stopping her. We'll save this spoiler for later, actually. Forgive me if I'm getting the order wrong, but something that happens around this part of the book is a trick by VISSER 3, whose plans have all failed thus far. And what happens is, they're in the middle of talking, and then suddenly, bang, a tiger and a grizzly bear, not a grizzly bear, yes, I believe it was a grizzly bear, come barreling through the door, and there are two morphed Hawk-Bajir as well, and they're supposed to be the Andalite bandits, and there's a bit of a scuffle. VISSER 3 slices the tiger's head off, and the bear is disintegrated, and the two Hawk-Bajir controls are killed by VISSER 3. Turns out that was a real tiger and a real bear, and the two morphed Hawk-Bajir were just Hawk-Bajir controllers who thought they would get away from this little escapade without being killed by VISSER 3, to which Edris rightly says, "You're a fucking idiot." But there's this, and VISSER 3 says, "Aha, look, Council of 13, this completely convenient thing that just happened. The Andalite bandits, I've dealt with them." What a fucking moron. Two things. One, as Gareth rightly states, as soon as this happens, how very convenient. He sees right through it. I love Gareth. Gareth's my favourite character in this book. But part 2, Zwei. So next time the Andalite bandits actually attack, and the Council of 13 learn about that, you fucked yourself, VISSER 3. Why would you do that? What a plonker. What an absolute twat. That's the right way of putting it. I mean, he's just a bumbling fool. He really is. How did he think this would work? But, hey-ho. You've got to remember as well that one of the acts of treason that's stated at the beginning is lying to the Council of 13, which VISSER 3 has just done, and Gareth has basically just said, yeah, we know that was fake. Yeah, we know. So this is where VISSER 3 is basically put on trial as well. Fuck. Hire a lawyer, VISSER 3. Jesus Christ, leave it to someone with half a brain. Edris's justification for all that's going on with the humans falling in love, having kids, her justification for all this is that she's learning about humans. Know your enemy, something that VISSER 3 quite rightly did when he was investigating the Andalites back in the Hawk-Bajir Chronicles. Probably the only thing he's ever done that's been reasonably intelligent. So VISSER 1 has been doing that, learning about humans. And Gareth is saying, seems logical. Pretty good, I like that. But he's still keeping in mind all these little things that just seem a bit off. And there are a few times where Edris lies. Quite a few times. She was talking about how Essam was basically going to betray the Yerk Empire, so she had to set out to kill him. Now, it's really, because it was quite a complicated part of the story, and one of the more complicated little plot threads throughout the whole series, so remembering it on the fly now is a bit difficult, but Yeah, so she says to the council, oh, I was going to go get Esam because he betrayed us and all that sort of stuff, and he took the kids as well. But it was a bit more complicated than that, and she wasn't really telling it exactly how it was. She was protecting herself. All the while, by the way, Eva, Marco's mother, is still inside her own head, of course, and is giving it a bit of that towards Edris. But after seeing Edris's kids and the way that Edris felt about them, she started to show a little bit more sympathy and started to work a bit more with Edris, throwing in little bits of information, saying how she's doing and all that sort of stuff, and quite a lot of interesting interactions. But it's getting to the point now where, I mean, I'm standing in front of the camera and I don't think I've had a problem before in explaining these books to you, but it does get a bit muddled at times, and there's lots of time shifting and going back to real life, going back to memories, going back to fucking transfer protocols and reversing back and forward in time. It did get a bit muddled at times, but that's not to take too much away from the book, because for the most part it handled it quite well. But it's such an amount packed into this book that at times it's difficult to store those bits of information. Should have taken more notes, really, shouldn't I? After the council find out about these two kids, Edris panics and thinks, oh shit, this is the big treason point. And she eventually says, I need to go take a piss. And so the council said, yeah, we need to as well. Let's go for another standard hour break. Now, remember early in the book, a standard hour felt like 3 minutes. Not this time, it felt like 3 bloody hours. So, silly, inconsistent book. So they leave and go to an eating place and have dinner. And there are other human controllers in there, of course. VISSER 3 is watching. There are Hork-Bajir guards there just looking over VISSER 1's shoulders as she eats. But another human controller has her phone go off, diddly, diddly, diddly. And Edris thinks, right, that's my ticket out of here. When this human controller gets up to leave, she gets up as well, bumps into her. They bumble about, and she swipes up the phone. VISSER 3, you know, with his 360 vision and all his Hork-Bajir guys, not one of them sees that, of course, because plot convenience. And then she says, right, I need to go up to the lab. She wanders off, and she has an idea. Because what happens now is Eva says, right, so the council knows about these two kids now. Whatever happens here, you know, these kids are now in danger. Your kids, the only bloody people in this earth you care about, they're in danger. What's going to save you? VISSER 3 losing the trial. How to do that? Well, because VISSER 3 is giving them an out by putting on this facade of these Animorphs and like bandits bursting in. And she says, you know that Marco is a controller, not a controller, an Animorph, or Andalite bandit, because we established that in book 30. Eva knows, Edris knows. You need to call Marco and tell them to get here and do some damage on this Yeerk pool that'll show the council that VISSER 3 has been lying and ruin the trial for him. So while she's got this phone in this lav, she calls Marco up, and that's the scene that we got from this book, the proposal at the end of 35. That was that little scene. So the Animorphs now know what's going on. Edris is like, yeah, if you want to save your mother, come here now. Edris then talks to Garoth once they return from their standard hour. By the way, it was apparently extended from the 3 minutes. And Edris put this down to potentially them discussing what had happened at the Anati planet. It's a race that's mentioned a couple of times here, so they sort of established that there's a Yeerk presence up there, but one of the ships disappeared. I don't think we ever come across this again. It's just an extra bit added to the lore, which I'm cool with. Happy with that. Throwing in some new races here and there, and other things going on. But they come back from that, and they ask Edris to continue, and she talks about how she's got this idea for the sharing. We all know the sharing. Apparently it was Edris that started it. But she comes up with this idea, and she contacts the Empire after about 14 months of not speaking to them, after having disappeared. And she tells them about the Class 5 race, the human beings. And this is where she believes she will end up being promoted to a high-ranking VISSER. So we've got that. How does she create the sharing, and how does she get the first voluntary controller? Interesting. She's still got the Alison Kim host, but she does like a host share thing. So she'll chain Alison Kim to a radiator when she's not using her, and then go into a new human, a real estate agent called Lawrence Altman. She changes his name to Lord David Altman, because something about 3 name things is good in the 90s. Don't remember. But yeah, Lord David Altman is who she uses to officially start the sharing. Now, I thought this was a very interesting part of the book. It really reminded me of some things in actual history. But she uses this guy with a big booming voice and a natural flair and a fascinating hairstyle. Uses him to lure people into this new creation called the sharing. And it starts out with 35 people attending. And he's there, sort of oratory prowess on this podium. And the room is lined with symbology, flying around, symbols representing the sharing. We are the sharing, and we will do this, that, and t'other. And builds a following. But how does she lure the people in? Well, she goes on about the inner sharing and the outer sharing. So the outer sharing is where new members come in, and the inner sharing is the voluntary controllers, essentially. The way that Edris puts it, paraphrasing, but some quotable stuff here, is that she was getting rid of their individuality. She was just getting rid of that. She was turning them into a collective. It wasn't about the individual. It was about the movement. It was about the symbols and not taking responsibility. Specifically, I believe she says, blaming the world for your problems rather than taking on the responsibility yourself. We've seen this sort of thing a lot in history, in real life, of course. So this movement, this guy at the front saying, I am the leader. And there's symbols everywhere, and they're saying, we are a collective and we are strong together. It's not your fault that your life sucks. It's the world's fault. It's society's fault. All that jazz. And I watched a documentary recently, and I really got this is what I was thinking at the time. Jim Jones. You know Jim Jones, Jonestown, that guy, where we got the whole Kool-Aid phrase from. I got a real Jim Jones vibe with this. The People's Temple. Whether it was actually something that was in Catherine's head when she was writing this, I don't know, but I got those vibes. The People's Temple vibes. They go in and they sort of get riled up. Yeah, we believe in this thing. And then you basically you're not an individual anymore. You are the sharing. That's the sort of vibe I get. But the first, I forget what his name was, but there was a first voluntary controller. And Edris says to him, are you willing to give up your individuality to become a member of the inner circle of the sharing, to shed your old life and start anew and share your life with somebody else and what have you? And he says, yeah, I want to do that. Because it's indoctrination, it's cult. It's telling people that you have to be part of this team to be something bigger than yourself. That's what this is. That's what the sharing is. Maybe that's why it's called the sharing. You're not individuals, you share everything. You are all equal, you're all part of this powerful movement. And that's why this guy comes up and says, I want to be part of this bigger movement. I want to be part of that. And in goes the Yerkslug, first voluntary control, and she reports that to the Empire. This is how we do it. Not a single shot was fired. And it was true. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how Edris became known as VISSER 1, and how the sharing started, and how we have the voluntary controllers. And I just love that we have this bit, because it's just so telling. Voluntary controls before, just like, well, why would they do that? We know and we understand. And it's a terrifying message. Go back to Jim Jones, Jonestown, all that stuff, the utopia they wanted to build. Look how it turned out. Cults are dangerous, but cults are effective. Eventually she settles more into the Lord David Altman thing, so she offs Alison Kim, number 6 on the murder list. And then she kills Lord David Altman, because as she says it, people will try to tear him down, Lord David Altman down. Best off him so he can be seen as a pariah or a martyr or however they see him. So that's 7 on the murder list. Quite the little serial killer we have here. And quite a devious and cunning one too. Certainly more cunning than VISSER 3. But speaking of VISSER 3's cunning, he does one cunning thing in this. He brings in Darwin. Yes, Darwin. One of Edris's actual children. And this is the part where this could be it. This could be the trial over. There's Darwin. And he hands Edris a human weapon, a handgun. And says, right, if you don't care about this, if you're loyal to the Empire, you'll have no problem killing your son. So, Edris stands there, gun to the child. And this is the worst fucking part of the book, because it's a deus ex machina. Don't you just love them? Oh, they arrived in the nick of time. And the Animorphs do. Great. Book, you're great, but you do let me down at times. Right? So this is a huge moment. This is the big moment. And as soon as, before any massive decision can be made, bang, the Animorphs come in and wreck the joint. Great. So there's a scuffle. VISSER 1 gets knocked out by Marco. And they drag her to a cave. And there's a hologram protecting them from sight. So he can only assume that Eric is there doing this. And fucking Eric. He was never mentioned, but you can only imply that Eric was there making this hologram so that the Yeerks couldn't find them. So yeah, he's apparently, he's there. We know he's there. And they probably used him to get in because remember, hunter robots, Gleep biofilters. So they would have had to go in as, certainly not in their battle morphs or any other morph other than Hawk Bajir or just in their normal human bodies. So they snuck through the Gleep biofilter, probably because Eric just led them in. Because he is there. We know he's there. So he probably just sauntered in, hologram, and everybody's just standing next to him. Yeah. Fuck's sake. Oh dear. And obviously the hunter robots can't sense the Animorphs, maybe because they can't see because of the hologram thing, I don't know. But this raises a big tangential question. Why the fuck have they not done this before? They've just snuck into the secret room that they somehow knew where it was. Did they search the entire facility before finding this one room, or did they just look for the most heavily guarded? I mean, that seems fair. But if Eric can just walk them in without a problem, why do they need to start a fight? Just walk in through the door, still with a hologram going. I don't know, pretend to be another Hawk Bajir guard or something, and then just whack, steal, gone. It just makes no sense. And in every other book, right, we need to go to the Earth pool. Call Eric, down we go to all the cages, unlock them, all the hosts out, job done, lads. Why do we never see that? Is it because Eric's a dick? Most probably. But for whatever reason, he agrees to do this on this one mission. One mission. To do a deus ex machina. Fucking great. Silly book. Run out of power and my blue box and my bob. Shit. So anyway, they take Edris into this cave. And she wakes up and she's confronted by the Animorphs who are threatening her and saying, right, now you need to leave Marco's mother and we'll throw you back into the Yeerk pool. And nobody will ever say anything about this because we're recording this conversation, another implication that Eric's there. And if you say anything, we will throw this straight back to the Council of 13 because we know who they are. And I found myself asking, how? How do... I suppose it's just an empty threat. Probably. I've just reminded myself of something. As they were having that scuffle in the meeting room with the Council of 13, Axe and VISSER 3 had a tailblade fight. Remember in book 18, when that was a big deal for Axe. Oh, I've got to have a Tailblade fight with the VISSER. Oh, I've got to gear myself up for this. In this book, for the first time it happens, they have a full-on Tailblade fight, and it's just an offhanded comment. Eh? Really? You're letting me down again, book. Yeah, they've got Edris in this cave. But Edris explains to the Animorphs, look, if you and me and VISSER 3 wins this trial or gets control of Earth, you're fucked, because his plan is not to be all super sneaky like me with the sharing and what have you. He just wants to blow shit up, and you're all going to die, essentially. But Marco threatens to have her killed, and Eva's saying to her, look, just let me talk to Marco, I can sort this out. And eventually Edris agrees, and he crawls out of Eva. Marco holds on to it, and we get this quite touching scene where Eva, Marco's mother, is talking to him and just explaining to him, look, we each need to fight this war in our own ways. If I don't go back and finish this trial, we are all fucked. So I know it's painful, Marco, and I know that you want to save me, but there will be another day perhaps. I need to do this because this is how we win the war. And this is huge for Marco, and it follows on from this book, The Proposal, because she says specifically to him, your father needs to move on. He's done his grieving. And that was a big point in The Proposal. So we'll talk more about this one towards the end. We're getting there anyway. We're getting towards the end now, thankfully. But yeah, we get this whole bit, and Marco really reluctantly puts Edris back into Eva and sends her on her way again. Edris is knocked unconscious again, so that she can later be found by the Yeerks and the Animorphs leg it. But during this, we have another flashback, another memory. That's when we see Eva and Marco talking. Edris wakes up, and VISSER 3's there saying, right, we need to go back to the trial room, because he's all grumpy, grouchy. And they go back there, and Gareth asks her to finish the story, talk about Essam and how he died, because he died, and Hildy Gervais was still alive, even though he was a homeless guy by this point. And she explains that last bit of the story where she had said to Essam, look, I'm getting rid of this Alison Kim character. She knows too much and I need to concentrate on Lord David Altman. And he doesn't like this. He loves the kids. He's fully into the human lifestyle now. He says, you're disgusting. I don't like this. And he legs it with the kids. But obviously he doesn't have any Kandrona. He doesn't, and he knows he's going to end up killing himself, but he said, I'd rather die than carry on with this despicable mission. I quite like Essam. He's a good character, and he grows that heart towards the end. He always seemed a bit more empathetic than Edris, but this is where it truly shows through, because Edris she's a psychopath. She really is. So yeah, she's killed Alison Kim at this point and goes to find Hildy Gervais. The kids have a high fever and he's taken them to a hospital where she's found this information and tracked them down. And he's on the verge of death. And Hildy Gervais is collapsing because Essam inside his head can't control him anymore. He's on the verge of dying. And they have their last little discussion. And then this is a fascinating part. He starts to crawl out of Hildy Gervais's ear. But he pretty much dies halfway out of his ear. And Edris pulls him out, but his body just falls apart, probably because a result of the Kandrona starvation. So there's still part of the Yeerk slug inside Hildy Gervais's head, just attached to his brain, which explains why he just goes he becomes a raving lunatic, essentially, which was a nice little full circle thing that I really appreciated. But she just puts Essam's dead half body into her pocket. And she essentially leaves the kids there to be orphaned off, essentially, and leaves them. And that's where we finish the story, essentially. So Gareth and the rest of the council say, right, we've considered, we're going to come back with our judgment. The VISSERs wait, and they come back with that judgment. And this is another bad part of the book, I'm sorry to say. All throughout this book, there's been that overhanging tension of one of these VISSERs is going to be found guilty of treason, and we know that the punishment for treason is death in one form or another. That's always been there. That's what this whole story is about, this trial where one of them is going to be found guilty and killed. What's the judgment? Right, you're both guilty. but we're just going to let you off so long as you do your jobs well. So this whole book was for nothing. Are you fucking kidding me? What? That's just the biggest anticlimax. Be honest. This whole book, all of it, everything that goes on, going through all these memories, was all for the purpose of this trial. What was the point of the trial? If they're going to say, right, we found you guilty, but we're not going to do anything about it. Okay. Great book. It's like one of those, it was just a dream endings. It might as well be oh, it was just a dream endings. Might as well be. You've let me down, book. You've let me down. That's basically it. That's the end of the book. But yeah, VISSER is, they tell him, right, you're guilty of lying to us, which is a death punishable by torture, I think it might have been. But we'll let you off so long as you conquer Earth. He's like, great, yay. Right, you, VISSER, you're guilty of countless crimes here, there and everywhere, all of them punishable by death, but we're going to send you to the Inati system, and if you do well there, we'll let you live. So she's going to go to the Inati system, apparently. And yeah, that's it. That's the end of the book. Whew, there is a lot in this book. A lot. And it's been a struggle for me. I've had to take regular pauses during the making of this video just to rejig myself, essentially, just to remember where I am. It is a bit... Muddles is too strong a word. There's a lot going on at different times, going through different time bits and whatever, memories and recollections and in-time stuff. That there is so much packed into 190 pages here that it's hard to remember all in one go. But I thought for the most part it was very entertaining. The lore in this, the stuff with the sharing, the stuff with her arriving to Earth for the first time and getting these human hosts and just offing them every time, just killing them off. This serial killer character, it was fascinating. It truly was fascinating. But this book is let down. It's let down by the inconsistencies that I've pointed out throughout this video. It's let down by the Deus Ex Machina in the middle where the Animorphs come in. That was a letdown. And there's a letdown at the end. The big problem with this book is it has grandiose themes and grandiose plots. But every one of those grandiose things comes to nothing. Comes to absolutely nothing. The Deus Ex Machina bit. She's got a gun to Darwin. Will she shoot him? Will he not? Will she shoot him? Will she not? No, that decision is taken away. That big moment is just robbed from us. End of the book. Who's going to be found guilty? Who's going to be killed? Robbed from us. That is this book's big guilt. It's a shame. It really is. Because apart from those moments, this is a clear 10 out of 10. But those two big moments, it's an 8 out of 10. I'm not going to rate Jake's leadership because he didn't do any leadership in this book. So it would be completely unfair to judge him on that. He was barely in the book. But yeah, that's that. I want to bring in the proposal, right? We did that on the last episode. And I was unsure of whether it was filler or not. I was like, is it filler? Is it not? Confirmed not filler, right? The whole bit with Marco, with Eva saying to him, you need to let your father move on. You need to move on. You need to make this decision. What was Marco's... Think back to the start of the books. Books 1 to 4. What was Marco's purpose of being there? He didn't really have one and he was about to quit. Book 5 comes along. What's his big reason for starting this fight? What's the big reason for him to stay there? Rescuing his mother. Now, because of these two books combined, that's no longer his reason. His reason has changed. She is no longer the big priority. Before these books, she was. Remember book 30? How desperate he was to get her back. It's changed now. And that's largely the subplot of the proposal. With Peter getting with Nora and Mark being like, no, I don't want this change. I don't want it. But by the end, he releases that. And that comes into this story. So yeah, proposal. Well done. You're not filler. A lot of people say that it is. You're wrong. That's coming from me, and I know my shit. But yeah, this book, VISSER, brilliant, apart from the lack of... I think the Animorphs gods are cursing me again. Because it doesn't like when I rate really popular books lower than people would expect. 8 out of 10. Brilliant for the most part. Absolutely fantastic. But those two big moments that just robbed us of those big payoffs. Nah, you can't get away with that. You cannot get away with that. So that's 2 points off there. But yeah, good book apart from that. Next up, this one. Mutation. We're moving into the next cycle, interestingly enough. The next cycle of books starts with The Mutation, which is another Jake book, of course. And we look forward to seeing that one. And I look forward to seeing you seeing me watching, reading the books, things. It's going to be great, okay? So tune in next week. So there's going to be more of it. And tune in on Friday, the day before, because I'll be doing my Cycle 7 review. I believe it's Cycle 7 at this point, going over the previous 5 books and VISSER together as a lot. Great, love it. Right, I'll see you then. Ta-ra.